For all you professional brewers out there, I'm here to tell you that planning brew schedules is easier than ever with Imperial Yeast, who guarantee that commercial orders up to 20 liters of 4 of their most popular strains will ship free if they're not in stock when you place your order. So in addition to pitching right with the highest quality yeast on the market, they're promising that yeast will be ready when you need it or shipping is on them. A killer deal from an incredible company. Whether you're a pro or a home brewer, if you haven't tried Imperial Yeast in your brewery, it is time to up your game. Check out everything Imperial Yeast has to offer and place your commercial orders at imperialyeast.com. As the saying goes, cleanliness is next to godliness, and in no other activity outside of perhaps surgery does this seem truer than brewing, where the presence of otherwise harmless microbes can turn what promised to be a delicious batch of beer into something only worthy of going down the toilet. You're listening to the Brewlosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and in this exBEERience episode, I'm joined by contributor Andy Carter to talk all about how we avoid such sad circumstances by keeping our brewing gear clean and sanitized.
Yeah, they say in the real estate industry, it's location, 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 and I say in brewing, it's sanitization, sanitization, sanitization. It's always in my mind. I'm always worried about it, and honestly, I think I learn something every time I brew about how to clean things better and how to sanitize things more deeply. So yeah,
I'm a nut about sanitization, sanitization, however you want to say it. It's funny because we've done so many experiments, and one variable that I've gotten recommended so many times, it blows my mind that people would want us to do this, is, well, you got to do a sanitized carboy or fermenter versus an unclean or unsanitized one. And that's just not something I'm necessarily interested in. Even if it did work out, it wouldn't change my mind on the importance of reducing the risk of a potential contamination. I've said before that I think one's perspective on cleanliness is hugely a function of their personality. And I just so happen to be one of those people who's pretty damn neurotic about it. Suffice to say, I took very seriously everything the dude at the homebrew shop I bought my kit at told me about the importance of keeping my gear clean and sanitized, to the point that I often stressed over whether I'd done enough. Over the years, I've adapted my thinking and approach when it comes to this stuff, and I look forward to chatting with you, Andy, about both of our experiences with cleaning and sanitation. All right, if you like what we're up to and you want to keep us doing it, consider becoming a patron of Brewlosophy. By committing a small monthly pledge over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. Coming up later this month is our good friend Dan Pixley from Milk the Funk, one of the smartest brewers I know, especially when it comes to sour and funky beers. If that's what you're into, you do not want to miss this session. To be a part of it, you do have to make your pledge by Saturday, July 25th, 2020, so jump on it. All past sessions are available on our private Facebook page, so patrons can go back and watch them whenever they like. Learn more about becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. Feedback is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who have an array of amazing purpose-built stainless brewing products to improve your brew day. If you're looking for a high-quality pilot brewery, make sure to check out the gorgeous BH15 single-tier system, which comes with a hard plumb manifold to eliminate all hosing changes during the brew process. Head over to brewershardware.com to see what they're all about. Make sure to mention Brewlosophy at checkout so that you receive a free gift. Again, that's brewershardware.com. Listener Frank Higgins had feedback on our latest Brews Views episode about homebrew clubs. So, Andy, this is relevant for you since you were the co-host on that episode. He says, I just retired and have been homebrewing for about 5 years. I recently went to a restaurant where the local homebrew club meets every month since I was curious about them and had a question about adding yeast when bottle conditioning. I introduced myself. I asked about this process. A few of the members said they'd never done this, and that was it. No hello, no questions about me, no do you want to sit down and join us. Ultimately, the other closest club is about an hour's drive from me. Unfortunately, he says, the other closest club is an hour away. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I don't like to measure things on one-off experiences, but, that didn't sound very welcoming. I'm surprised he even knew about the club meeting there if they were so standoffish. So, you can always try again. If there's a point of contact with that club, if they have any marketing, I would definitely bring that up. Maybe you don't want to say your exact experience, but I would try to reach out again. And, sometimes those are, like we mentioned on the mentioned on the podcast, there are clubs that exist. And, if that's a reoccurring thing, then that's really not the club if you want to learn more.
Yeah. I'm with you, Andy. It's a major bummer, that Frank's first experience was what it was. I don't know what club it was. He didn't mention the club he was referring to or where he's from. But if I were in his shoes, I'd probably be inclined to attend another couple meetings before completely writing them off. That's just kind of, how I am, I guess. The other thing with club meetings, especially if they're in the middle of the week, you're going to get a different cast of characters every time you go. Some people aren't going to be able to make it to one meeting. Maybe next month there's going to be people there who are a little more, I guess, inclusive. I don't know.
Yeah. And then the other way to think about, to your point of the meeting time, hopefully as clubs go more digital, there is a digital aspect where you can interact at any time, and you're going to see a different cross section of the club.
Yeah.
We have, Facebook groups or Google Hangouts or those kind of things. So you hope to maybe meet other parts of the club that are more about the education and learning and more open arms.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about this on that Brews Views episode, but the one really good thing about the kind of growing digital club or online clubs nowadays is that you have that constant contact and so many different personalities and different types of people that you're bound to congeal with some of them. And so that's another option. But again, Frank, if it's me, I'm probably going to go to another couple of sessions or another couple of meetings and see if maybe I can't click with some of the people who show up. It does suck that was your first experience, but keep an open mind and recognize that people are different, and you'll probably see some new faces at future meetings. That's my guess, at least.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, right. Well, thank you for the feedback, Frank. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. So I have this really good friend. His name is Tim, and he occasionally reviews beers people send in for the show. One of the more peculiar things he apparently tastes in some of these beers, especially IPA, is juniper, which I've often wondered about because to me, juniper is very gin-like. Well, listener James Bywater wanted to test old Timmy's juniper detecting abilities and sent in a beer from Ketos Brewing out of Salt Lake City, Utah called Wild Path. It's an American amber ale that's actually made with juniper.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
Don't spill any.
Nobody spilled anything. Timmy, go, 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 go.
This is a good looking beer right here.
Yes, I love technology.
Did you smell that?
Timmy, I like when you do the reviews. You're better than me.
I am not.
What you got?
I don't know. It does smell. Whew. I'm not sure if I like this.
What is it? You don't know.
Shocker. It's kind of piney smelling.
Oh, Timmy, I love this.
Do you? The second sip was a lot better.
This is another amber. This is a DBA.
I do like it.
Oh, my God. This is DBA. This is DBA off of my tap in my house. The mother thought he could fool us. This is Firestone Walker DBA.
Well, it kind of like lemony.
No. You know how I'm always worried about, like, what if it's not an IPA and we say it's an IPA? I officially now will announce.
Well, it's not an IPA.
This is a Firestone Walker DBA, and if you disagree with me, I will cut you.
I don't think it is.
This is a DBA.
It's not bad.
What do you mean it's not bad? This is delicious.
Let's not get carried away. It has a little, like, lemon to it, doesn't it?
Oh, my God. I don't give a so good. This is so good.
My first sip was not good.
Do you like this beer?
I do now, yeah.
Would you drink this beer?
I wouldn't continue to drink it, but
I love you so much.
It's all right.
Dude, this better be DBA. That mother.
It's not.
We're so learned.
It's got a lemon character to it.
You have a lemon character. I love this beer. I give it 10 jerseys. It's a DBA.
Yeah, I'll give it a 7 or 8.
I love this beer. I love it.
I wouldn't say this beer tasted that much like Firestone Walker DBA, but it did share some similar characteristics, so I'm not going to fault Jersey for that. Now, Timmy did note a lemony thing going on in this beer, which, if you ask me, isn't terribly far off from what I actually get from juniper. And in fact, I detected it as well. Funny enough, he didn't note juniper, which, not to pat my back, but sort of proves my point that Tim may not really know what he's talking about when it comes to juniper.
Well, it's got a herbal. You walk down your path of flavors, and you're in the herbally, spicy category, and maybe you couldn't make the jump to juniper. Maybe you can't taste it. But yeah, I mean, lemon is fruity, herbally. You know, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, calling that juniper for now.
Yeah. Well, I'm convinced what Tim tastes as juniper is pine, and for some reason he's just calls it juniper. I don't know why. But to me, you know, I love gin and tonic. I usually cut the tonic half with just sparkling water. But what I always squeeze in there is either lemon or lime, and that. So I associate that gin flavor with a citrusy herbal, you know, altogether. The gestalt is that kind of citrus herbal thing. And I really enjoy that. So it doesn't surprise me that he picked up this lemony thing. I did too. Again, it wasn't piney at all. And if it was piney, I imagine that he would have said juniper. So, but the beer itself was very good. It was, I would never, I'm not a fan of using herbs other than hops, in my brewing, but this one I didn't really taste a strong juniper note. It wasn't gin-like. It was just kind of like, I would have imagined you could have gotten the same characteristic from hops. But the beer was really well done. And I think that was the third or the fourth beer that James sent to us from Ketos. And man, they're doing some good stuff down there in Salt Lake City.
Sounds good. I definitely wouldn't check those guys out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for sending those beers in, James. We really do appreciate it. If you'd like to have your beer or somebody else's beer reviewed by Jersey and Tim on the show, you can email me, Marshall@brewlosophy.com, and we'll get you all set up. All right, time to give a little love to our sponsors. We'll be right back with our experiences cleaning and sanitizing. Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the exGEERitor, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to exGEERitor.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Craftmaster Growlers takes traveling with and sharing beer to a new level. Made from heavy-duty stainless steel, Craftmaster Growlers are double-wall insulated and can keep beer cold for up to 8 hours. Unlike typical growlers, Craftmaster Growlers come with a swiveling tap and fully integrated CO2 regulator cap, allowing beer to stay fresh for 2 weeks or more. The square design takes up less space and will fit in most refrigerator doors, and every Craftmaster Growler comes with a 1-year warranty. There are 64 and 128-ounce versions available over at craftmastergrowlers.com. The brew in a bag method has blown up over the last few years, and in that time, it's become very clear that not all bags are created equal. For the best BIAB experience, you have got to go with the Brew Bag. Made from high-quality, food-safe polyester, the Brew Bag is available in both 210 micron for standard brew in a bag, as well as 400 micron, which works beautifully for all-in-one recirculating systems. I've been a Brew Bag user for years and wouldn't brew without it. Head over to brewinabag.com to get the fabric filter that works for you and use promo code TBP17 at checkout to receive a discount. Again, that's brewinabag.com. I've been known to claim that brewing is a lot easier than many folks make it out to be, and I stand by that. It's really not that hard to make a decent batch of beer. However, it does require a fair amount of gear, even for those using less complicated methods like extract or brew in a bag, which is why I also claim that brewing is like 90% cleaning. The fact is, good beer, in my opinion at least, requires good cleaning and sanitation practices.
Absolutely. You know, we talk about cleaning and sanitizing, and when I said up front, the sanitization, that's to prevent infection, wild yeast, then this big variable. But if you go just peel back or zoom out a little farther, it's really about being consistent beer. And then consistent beer means a similar microbiological profile throughout the whole process.
Yeah.
And so I'm about consistency because I'm changing recipes. I only want one thing to change, the recipe, nothing else. So I want to make sure my equipment is the same every time. My fermenters are, as sanitized as they can be, and then all the way to the tap handle, all the way in the kegs and everything. So you want to just watch that the entire way through. And honestly, it's the biggest dividend payment back for your brewing if you are clean and sanitary.
Yeah. The return on your investment is way higher than the consequences of not being thoughtful when it comes to cleaning and sanitation. Now, we did break this down into cleaning and sanitation. We're going to go through different gear, all the big gear that you use on a brew day and how we clean and sanitize it. I think there'll be some interesting stuff people will learn from us on that. But I feel like I just mentioned recently this experience that I had. I never really considered myself much of a clean freak until I was brewing with a buddy of mine probably 6 years ago. He invited me over. We were in his kitchen. He had just bought his first brew in a bag setup. So he'd done a couple extract batches. I hadn't had his beer. He lives in a different city. But he was into brewing, and that was exciting for me. And I figured, hey, he's going all grain. He's probably pleased with his beer. And, we didn't really go dig into cleaning and sanitation, and I'm watching him brew this beer, and I was just aghast at the things that he was touching and not sanitizing. And so it really reminded me, again, and this is why I say I feel like it's really a personality thing. Just that the perspectives that we have on what it means to be clean and what it means to be sanitary are do differ between people.
Yeah. So my background is in clean rooms. I work as an electrical engineer in a clean room. So we're cleaning things. We clean things a lot, and I think about that stuff, and it gets more into the microscopic, nanoscopic area. But at home, cleaning homebrew equipment, I've gone through and I've tried pretty much everything on the market in terms of cleaners and sanitizers. So I have my place now. But I've learned a lot just doing it. All the different ways people do clean stuff, and it depends on your budget, your hardware, and those kind of things too. So I think trying to break all those options down, and then you're going to find the way you like to do it, and then see how that works for you, and then go from there. Exactly,
and I think that's a big part of it. I mean, there are very popular cleaners and sanitizers out there that are going to work for you, but I feel like there's process elements as well, and things maybe hopefully we talk about some stuff that some listeners haven't considered, and it may help them, I don't know, clean up their game a little bit. Now, anyone who brews knows very well that there are different pieces of gear for various steps of the brewing process. I thought it might be interesting for us to discuss not only our experiences keeping that stuff clean and sanitized, but our thoughts on what's actually important. Let's start on the hot side. We're going to kind of try to go in order of the brew day. I know there are some conflicting ideas out there as to what's really necessary when it comes to cleaning and sanitizing gear used prior to the wort being boiled.
Yeah, so the hot side, cold side, if that breaking point is when you pitch yeast or put wort into a fermenter and pitch yeast. The hot side, where we have the mash tun, the boil kettle, any type of pipe or fitting that you have, tubing. In general, I want to make sure that stuff is clean or free from any organic material when it goes away for the day. So if I'm going to come into start up my morning and my brew day, I want to make sure when all that stuff comes in, it was already clean to begin with. If there was an issue, well, I better fix it soon because I'm about to start brewing. I'm not going to say that I'm sanitizing as much, like using real like Star San. We'll get into all this details of which chemicals and stuff in a little bit, because those pieces of equipment are usually exposed to very high temperatures. So if they're clean, they should be sanitized by the high temperatures already.
Yeah. So you commented on something that I hadn't even considered talking about, but I've heard of people, and this, I just can't imagine living like this, but people who will, brew and then they leave their mash tun full of grains and their boil kettle full of trub out for, until the next time they brew, and that's when they clean it up. If I were to make a recommendation, I'd recommend maybe not doing that. I mean, it's one easy way to stink up your garage if that's where you're brewing. But also, what a pain in the ass to have to go back to and clean.
It is like we said, it's a lot of brewing is a lot of cleaning, and I know at the end of a day, if you've been doing stuff for all day, depending on your system could take hours to brew on. The last thing you want to do is, okay, now I have to clean all this stuff. Honestly, like we said earlier, it is going to be the huge dividends for you.
Yeah.
Now, you can make the argument, hey, it's boiled, it's fine. As soon as those grains start cooling down, as soon as those little bits of liquid, that sweet liquid, start cooling down, bacteria is going to get in there eventually, and then you're going to have a real mess on your hands.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
what you don't want to have.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we did break this this episode down into cleaning and sanitation, and you had talked a little bit about how on the hot side, and when we say hot side, we're just referring to anything that comes before the boil. And I guess you could argue the boil would be the last hot side thing that's occurring.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your take is on this. I don't sanitize anything on the hot side. My take is, like you said, heat, the once that heat gets up, the boil is more than hot enough to kill off any of the beer spoilage bacteria or wild yeast that we're concerned about. So my mash tun, all the stuff, I'm saying this as a disclaimer to get it out of the way, because we will talk about how we clean that stuff, but I don't do any sanitizing steps for anything that comes on the hot side.
Yeah. And so like any type of sanitization liquid that you would use, you're using heat, the power of hot water to be the sanitizer,
right?
Not Star San or iodophor or bleach or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So now I'm not. If you are one of those people who's even more nutty than me, which if you are, I'm so sorry. It's a rough life. But if you do want to keep sanitizing your mash tun and your boil kettle and all that, by all means, go for it. I to me would be a waste of sanitizer, and that stuff's not cheap. So I choose not to do it. I've never had an issue because of that. So
there could be some corner cases if you're doing some no boil or some Berliner Weiss type, sour mashes and stuff where you're trying to like just minimize things going on in there. But honestly, the hot water, again, clean as long as it's free from debris, I think you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Now, free of debris. That gets us back into the cleaning thing. We're going to start with the mash tun. Now, again, there are so many small little things that we could talk about cleaning, and we would just be sitting here for 4 hours, and it'd probably get very boring. Refractometers, spoons, your whisks, your mash paddles, all that stuff. You probably can figure out how to clean that on your own. Hot side, cold side, sanitize all the stuff on the cold side. That's what I'll say with that. Now, when it comes to the first big major piece of gear that I think most people are using would be your mash tun. Now, if you're doing brew in a bag or anything like that, your mash tun's going to be your kettle probably. But I've used a couple of different types of mash tuns. The first one was and I think it's still very popular. I was batch sparging or no sparging in a converted cooler, MLT, a mash lauter tun. And I actually got called out on my cleaning procedures for this. So I'm going to ask you to talk about what you did, because you were brewing in a cooler just up until a couple of months ago, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I have done all grain for a long time. Originally, it was a blue rectangular cooler with a bazooka screen, and it's a weldless fitting. So you take out the old stopper at the bottom of the filter or bottom of the mash tun. You put this in, and it's like a foot long screen and a two-way ball valve. And I've done that for like 8 years. For cleaning that, honestly, just some hot water at the end of the day. Make sure there's no debris. Leave the valve open so it can dry, and that's it. I mean, it's really all I've ever done.
You and I, dude. Me too. That was all I ever did. And what I brewed so often, those Coleman coolers or Igloo or whatever brand you're doing, that they're white on the inside, and that wort is usually not white or clear. So it would discolor pretty massively. I mean, I probably went through because I was upgrading batch sizes and all that stuff. I probably went through 3 or 4 different coolers, and in every one, after 20, 25 batches, I had basically a beige looking, interior to my mash tun. But my procedure was exactly the same. As soon as I was done brewing, and usually it was while I was waiting for that wort to come up to a boil. This is I'm so nerdy about this. I just wanted to get it done as quickly as possible. I would scoop out all of those grains. I usually put them in a bucket and give them to a friend who has chickens. So I'd scoop out those grains until there was as little left as possible. And then I have on the side of my house, I have a water hose with a really powerful nozzle on it. And I would put it on the jet stream, and crank the water hose all the way up so that it was just super powerful. and spray every last bit of grain out of there. I would push that through. I'd open the valve all the way on my, on the bottom of the mash tun, and I'd spray the water through there just in case any flicks of grain got into I didn't use the bazooka tube. I used the old toilet braid, those stainless toilet braid. But same concept though. And I'd spray the water through there. I'd spray the top of the braid off. There would be no grain left. And then I would leave it out in the sunshine for 4 or 5 hours. Just my wife had told me before at some point that, the sun kind of bleaches things and can to me, I'm just thinking it dries it off so no mildew grows, but perhaps it had some other impact as well. And I never had an issue with that. And, the only time I ever considered it was when my buddy Matt came over and was like, dude, your mash tun looks gross. And he told me that after every brew day, he would PBW his mash tun, his plastic mash tun. I know it seemed wasteful to me, but I mean, who am I to question his approach?
I do it, depending on what's going on. I'll bring PBW in if it's dried out a little bit, just to clean up, lift that stuff off. But I'll rinse with water, and I mean, water gets rid of most of it. I think the cooler looks not too bad. It looks okay. There's some discoloration. I think the only time I had a problem was I think I left it out for a few days without really cleaning it, and it got kind of smelly in there. So I just chucked it and got another one, just because I'm not going to work. I'm not making my beer any worse. I'm just going to get a clean one, and that's it. So I would never chuck it for discoloration. But if it gets dirty, you get lazy one day, something's going to happen. So and that's what I do.
Yeah, I had the very first mash tun I made. I think it was probably the same cooler, like a 40-liter blue Coleman cooler. And there was one time where it was raining outside and I just didn't feel like drying it out with towels. And so I left it out in the garage, and I think one of my kids came along and bumped the lid and it closed, and I put it away. I forgot about it. And sure enough, I came back 2 weeks later to brew another batch, and there was mildew in it, and I scrubbed it with bleach and did all that stuff. But probably smarter if you're able to just toss it and get a new one. Those things aren't that expensive. So Well, I have also had the opportunity to use stainless mash tuns. These aren't much different than a stainless, kettle. So I suppose it's kind of the similar idea. But I had the SS Brewtech Infusion mash tuns for a while. Awesome pieces of gear. And my cleaning routine on that one was a little bit different. They're pretty heavy. So I wasn't, didn't want to really move them around too much while they were full of grains. And so what I would do there is I'd pull in either my bucket that I was going to give to my buddy with the grains, or my green garbage bin for the plants and whatnot. And I'd scoop all the grains into there, and then it had a false bottom. So I'd take the false bottom off, spray it down. I always used cold water on this hot side stuff because it's coming out of my tap on the side of my house, and it's just more convenient. So I'd spray that down, make sure there was no grains on that. And then I'd move the mash tun outside and basically do the same thing for, this is when I ended up rewatching old reruns of the Shark Tank show, which I absolutely love. And I saw the one with the guy who was selling the scrub daddies, and I told my wife, I said, those might be pretty good little brewery cleaners they're not that expensive. So she picked me up a 3-pack. They work phenomenally well for getting, that stuff off that maybe just, a strong stream of water alone won't do. So that's what I did. I'd scrub them down. And then with the infusion mash tuns, I'm not sure how this is on other ones, but there's a hole in the bottom that drains out through a valve as well. So I would spray water both ways, because I don't really, you can't see, the pipe that goes from that bottom drain valve out to the side valve. Sure. So I'd spray water both ways until it ran clear, and that was it. I never had an issue with that either.
Yeah, so I have since a few months I've upgraded to the Brewzillas from Kegland, and now it's all stainless. So those are a single vessel unit, so they're more complicated. But in general, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to clean them and everything like that. But any part I can't see, anything that's overt, covered by my eyes because it's somewhere underneath or something, I would probably put PBW through that just to make sure that, something is getting down there that's lifting off organic material. Otherwise, you could have a problem. This could also happen in in any type of vessel that has like a sight glass, where there's some twists and turns that you don't want to disassemble. You can't disassemble everything. Now we're really adding a lot more time, and it's what's your time versus cleaning versus all these variables that you're going to have at your own place.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I ever used PBW once on my infusion mash tuns, and those things, I probably put 70 batches through those bad boys, and I'll tell you, they were sparkling. When I was not using them anymore, and they were sitting in my garage, things looked brand new. So I really think for me, and maybe I'm just telling myself this as like personal validation, but the fact that I would immediately clean them as soon as I was done using them. I mean, I'd collect that sweet wort, I'd get it in the boil kettle, I'd light the heat, and then I'd go outside and clean those things up. I feel like that contributed to them staying in tip-top shape.
I think that's true. And you could use, mechanical force rather than chemical force for all these steps. So you can put some elbow grease into it, and those things are going to be, a new fresh surface. And you're right as rain. So
yeah. Now we spent a little time talking about the bazooka tubes or the little mesh tubes that we used in our mash tuns, but there are other forms of grain filters. I talked about the false bottom that I had in the infusion. Nowadays, I'm brewing primarily brew in a bag. So I'm using a fabric filter from the brew bag, really fine mesh. They're awesome. I think a lot of people are using them. And I actually get questions about this quite often. What are you doing to clean them out? It's not very difficult in my experience. I've been using the same ones for almost 2 years now, I think. And they're discolored a little, but they're completely fine. There's no holes. There's no issues with them. What I do is I'll remove the grains from the wort. And as that's heating up, it's basically the same process. I'll move those grains into a bucket that's next to my kettle, carry those out to my side yard, and then I just flip the bag over into a bucket to rid the bag of all of the grains that are in there, or pretty much the majority of them, and then pull the bag off, and I take that water hose that I've been using for everything else, I spray down the outside of the grain bag, so the side that has the ridges on it. And then as soon as that's clean enough, I just flip it inside out, give it a good spray until there's no grains left on it. And then I do this weird thing where I spin it around my head to dry it off, like a lasso. And then I just hang it out to dry. It takes about 10 minutes. It's perfectly dry. I bring it back in. I've never had one grow mildew on it.
Nice.
So that's all I do. I've never thrown it in the washing machine. I don't know if people do that. I've never bleached it. I don't have any issues with those grain bags. And they are, like I said, first ones that I've got for my SS 1V systems, and they're still kicking like karate. So
yeah. So I've not done it the mash with the bags, but I do secondary keg adjuncts, and I'll have a fine nylon mesh bag that'll hold coffee or cocoa nibs or whatever is going to be there. That's just to keep it together, so it's easier to pull out when I'm done with that infusion. And I do the same exact thing. I will take that bag, empty it out of its contents, flip it inside out, give it a couple more rinses, and let it just dry. One big difference is, and this is where we cross from, or what, not difference, but something I've read, the homebrew lore, and again, we're trying to give you our experience, not just conjecture, but I've read that if you expose those things to some detergents like that have fragrances, you might never get that fragrance out.
I've read the same thing. Yeah.
So I would caution anyone, you really want to clean this thing, just do a really good job with water. If you need PPW, okay, I would not look into just putting in the family laundry unit. I think you're going to be asking for trouble, but that's what I've read.
Yeah. And again, I know there are people out there who want to keep their brew in a bag bags looking really clean and white and all that. By all means, soak them in PPW, soak them in bleach if you need to, clean them out really well. I've not done that, and I've not had any issues. So I'm going to stick with what I've been doing, and it's worked really well. Now, okay, a lot of mash tuns, we're kind of getting to the end of this segment here, but a lot of them, most mash tuns these days do have valves on them. I think we both kind of touched on how we clean the valves on our mash tuns. We're going to hit on that in more detail when we talk about our next piece of gear, which is the boil kettle. And this is a weird one for me because boil kettles are very hot. You're boiling wort at 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees C.
Yep.
And that is hot enough to kill most things. So in my mind, at first, at least, I tell myself, it doesn't matter. The discoloration, whatever, doesn't really matter because everything around there is getting so hot that the next time I brew, it's going to kill anything that might have fallen in there or grown in there, for the subsequent batches.
Yeah, in general, we're relying on the temperature to break apart organic material, which is breaking up cell walls. There's no food for these bugs to eat, so on and so forth. I think the one thing, though, is seeing that these things are seeing high temperatures for longer periods of time. You're not necessarily going to have a cleaning issue as much as a mineral deposits, beer stone kind of issue,
Right.
which causes starts to begin those discolorations. So stainless steel is supposed to be corrosive free, but as you scrub it and expose it to acidic chemicals over time, if it gets any little scratches, it's going to start to, things will start to go wrong, and it needs to be repassivated. So it's not so much cleaning as it's like maintaining the surfaces inside these vessels.
Yeah. I've, it wasn't really until, first off, the times that I would clean my boil kettle the most was way back in the days, like when I'd had like a 10-gallon kettle and I upgraded to a 15-gallon. So I wanted to sell the 10-gallon one on Craigslist. So I would make it look as pretty as possible. Like that was the most I cleaned my boil kettles.
Sure.
Nowadays, things are a little bit different because I'm using an electric kettle. So it's got that, the SS does the halo element. And, of course, anytime you're boiling wort and you're adding hops to it, you're going to get that ring at the top of the kettle that the hops and the hot break stick to. You got to figure out a way to get that off. Again, I found that the Scrub Daddy works wonders.
Nice.
This is not a commercial for Scrub Daddy, I promise you, but they work really well and they're cheap. Another thing, my wife bought me a pack of just standard sponges that have the scrubby side on them. Those you got to give a good rinse to because I think they come pre-packaged with some sort of a...
Yeah, they smell like something. So I always get them a good soak in hot water just to be sure.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I wanted to stop using them, just because I didn't know what that was. I assumed it was just dish soap or something.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've seen people use and I've never done are like steel wool. Get that in there and scrub that stuff off. Apparently it works really well on beer stone as well. I've never used it, but again, I've heard good things about it. I don't think it will. My biggest concern with that is the passivation piece of it, right?
Oh,
if you're doing that, are you scrubbing off the passivation that you want to have on the kettle?
And so when I had my old system with the Igloo cooler, I have a Blickman 10-gallon to do 5 to 7 gallon batches in. And, over time you clean those things and you get something that looks kind of brownish. And this is the stainless steel finish passivation wearing off. And it's actually pretty simple to fix that. You actually many people have Star San or some type of phosphoric acid based sanitizer that at full strength can actually help repassivate those surfaces. So there are ways, and you can read online how to do that. So if that's concern for you, for me, it was not that much of a concern. I made sure it was clean at the end of the day. It had some discoloration. It was fine.
Yeah.
The main thing, I took my Blickman experience and related it to the Brewzilla, is at the end of that brew day, the wort's put away, and we'll get into the cold side in a minute. The wort's put away. I'm going to give everything a rinse in water, try to knock the particles off. I'm going to use PBW just because I like it. Just allows me to use less mechanical force, and I'm just lifting off all the gunk, and I'll finish with water again just to leave it with that clean surface.
So are you doing that after every brew day?
Yeah.
So you are a little bit more nut than I am on this.
Yeah, I like it to be. I like it to go away clean. I guess I like that clean thing, and I think I do. I do pay a price. I mean, I'm buying more PBW, and one thing I am using though is a trick, or something I've learned about PBW is using reverse osmosis water and PBW, so it lasts a bit longer. I do this for Star San too. We can get into it. I think it's more important for Star San, but it's a water source that's less minerals, so it's not fighting the buffering capacity of the water as much. So you get, I think, a little more clean. The one thing I've found over time though is PBW, if you're reusing it, it does lose its efficacy pretty quickly if it's very soiled. So you can't just it'll just stop working. It'll just stop cleaning stuff basically at some point.
I've never actually considered reusing any cleaner, and I've used a ton. Yeah, I've never. It's not something that I store and reuse, or even reuse twice. Like if I've got 2 carboys, I do 2 different batches of cleaner, and that's how I do it.
Gotcha.
Now I will tell you that one of the things with since I moved to the electric brewing system, which I absolutely love, we've got a show on that. You can go listen to that. But I have, for some reason, I've gotten a little bit more concerned with the whole beer stone build up, and I mean it only takes one batch, and you go and you wipe out your kettle and clean it off really good. Give it a day, you're going to see a discoloration on your element and on the bottom. It's the same stuff that's on the bottom of the kettle, and so I don't want that there. I'm now using that kettle for the mash. I'm using it for the boil. I chill in it. I do all of that. I want it to be as clean as possible, and so I do try to mind it a little bit more. And so I'll go every 2 or 3 batches batches now until it really starts to show up. And that's when I'll do a cleaner soak. Now, I was using the Craftmeister alkaline brewery wash, and I was having, to me, it worked exactly the same as PBW, which works really well too. Well, and I promise this is not an advertisement for anything. The folks at exGEERience, so they make a counterflow chiller. So again, counterflow chillers, you can't see on the inside of that. And so they partnered with a cleaner maker or cleaner manufacturer or something like that to make something that was so powerful yet safe to use that you wouldn't have to, basically, they want to reduce users of their chillers worry that the inside of that thing is clean. They sent me some to try out, and I don't get surprised at cleaners and sanitizers. This stuff surprised the hell out of me at how well it worked. I've done side-by-sides with other cleaners, and I don't want to diss them because they've worked for years for me, but I'll be going back to the exGEERience stuff. I actually just got off a phone call with the folks from exGEERience, and he was just asking what my experience is. That's basically all I wanted. They want to know my experience using this cleaner. They've done testing 30% more efficient than any other cleaner that's out there. So you imagine how much less you're using. And I've been using that. What I'll do is I'll just sprinkle like a half a tablespoon, maybe a full tablespoon on the bottom of my kettle, hit it with the hottest water that comes out of my utility sink, and let it sit for 15, 20 minutes. I don't even have to scrub it really, but I'll get my little scrub daddy out, give it a nice little scrub, sparkling clean. And it's awesome. It does, like you said, it makes me feel really good. Now, there are a lot of people out there who will talk about SIP, clean in place. You can use cleaners and stuff like that to recirculate a cleaner through. I don't think either of us do that. And so we're not going to hit too much on that here, but so I kind of broke it down into these little parts, and I'll do that hot thing with the exGEERience cleaner, hot water, and then just go give it a quick scrub, rinse it out. I let it air dry. I flip my kettle upside down, let it air dry for about an hour, and then all is good.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I think in general, keeping this stuff clean and use to use is the best way to maintain the equipment. Because what you don't want to have is if you've not maintained it and then something fails, and now what do I do during the brew day? Even how do I fix this? How do I do this? And so you just want to make sure those things are in tip-top shape. And I think cleaning it allows you to kind of inspect things as well. Yeah. And that's how you can kind of maintain your brewing equipment over time.
Well, and at the very least, I think, like the whole beer stone thing in the bottom of my kettle or around that halo element, I can eliminate, if I brew a beer that isn't where I want it to be and it maybe has an issue, I can at least eliminate that as being a variable, or you can't really eliminate anything, I guess, unless you're testing. But still, it seems like it would reduce the risk of that being what it is. Now, brew kettles have various ports nowadays. The one that I'm using actually has one on the side that I don't use for anything. So I keep it plugged. I have a plate over it with a tri-clamp that holds it on. I've been asked, what do you do to clean that? I don't take that thing off. What I do is I take the hot water from my utility sink and I just spray it in there. I kind of squeeze the tip of it so it's coming out real nice and fast. I spray it in there, no issues. Again, I'm doing it right after I'm done boiling or chilling the wort, really. So it doesn't have time to get sticky or gunky in there. And so I've gone in and I've removed that little plate just to see, and it is perfectly clean even after 15 batches. Yeah. So
nice. Yeah, I mean, for my Blickman stuff, there was different ports, different things, and I'll take it apart every few brews just to make sure it's completely clean on all the sides, because it's kind of has a right angle to it. Yeah. And then the Brewzilla, there are parts of the system that I just can't see, so that's why I like putting the PBW in there just to make sure. Yeah. So it's just like it's a little, for me, it's like safety mark. It's just like a factor. Yeah. And it's a little bit more work at the end of the day, but because it has a pump, it doesn't take it nearly as long, and I can heat pretty rapidly and stuff if it's not too much liquid. So
yeah, if I had a pump built into my system, I'd be recirculating, basically doing a clean in place type of a system as well. I just think you're better safe than sorry in that type of a situation. Now, anyone who's been following Brewlosophy long enough has probably read about my buddy Wes's experience where he and about 5 of our friends came together, and every batch of beer he was making just had this problem, and it was this gross kind of earthy flavor, and it was a diacetyl, and just not a good thing. And it took us probably 5 weeks to boil it down to, no pun intended there, but to boil it down to, have you taken apart your 2-piece ball valve on the bottom of your kettle? Well, the typical response from a home brewer is, why would I do that? It's so close to the bottom of my kettle. It's easily getting up to temp. And I said, one of us, I don't know if it was me or my buddy Sean or whatever, but said, well, next time you're boiling a batch, just give a touch to your, touch the outside of the valve and see if it's actually hot or not. Lo and behold, he does that, and it's cool to the touch. I mean, it's barely warm. Yeah. So he takes this ball valve apart. There's pictures on the website. It's just disgusting. I mean, there was all this crap growing in there. And sure enough, when he swapped it out, cleaned it out, I don't put a new one on or cleaned out the old one, issue was gone. Nice. So that was, I was among the masses who were saying there's no way it'd be a ball valve issue. I've since moved to mostly tri-clamp valves. So it's not, now his issue, I'll be honest, his issue wasn't in the NPT threads. A lot of people will complain about that. His issue was in the center of that 2-piece ball valve. I mean, so how many people are taking those apart? I wasn't. And so it became a routine for me to take those apart and clean them after every 4 or 5 batches. So
I didn't even know that you could take a 2-piece apart until I read this article. I do find this one. I remember this one very vividly. It's from 2014. It's actually one of my favorite Brewlosophy articles because of what it found.
Yeah.
It's for 2-piece ball valves and 3-piece. And so for the 3-piece ball valve at my place for the Blickman, I actually would take that thing apart every time and let it just dry. Because it was so easy for me to take those things apart. I just was like, boop, 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 it's done. And it's just so it's clean.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot. It's funny. A lot of people that when they were commenting on that article, or I'd get emails, were saying, "Well, you got to tell Wes to move to a 3-piece. They're so great."
Yeah.
So the ball valve that's on the SS that I've got now, the 1V electric system, is actually a 3-piece, but it doesn't have NPT threads. It has the tri-clamp. So I've not had an issue with that, but I do. As soon as we're done, I don't take the whole thing apart, but I do rinse it with really hot water and I leave it open to dry, and I've not had any issues yet. You better believe if I start having consistent issues, that's one of the places I'll check. Those. So you can, though, you can take apart those 2-piece and 3-piece ball valves. I'd recommend doing it, especially if you're having issues and you're looking for the source. Now, the final hot side piece of gear that I can think of, we kind of touched on it earlier, is the chiller. I use immersion chillers exclusively just because that's what I like, and my cleaning process for them isn't very detailed. I take it out with the kettle, I pull it out of the kettle, and I spray it down with water. Maybe once a year, I'll set it in my bucket of sanitizer solution that I keep in the garage just to get it a little more clean. But I don't do anything other than that. I spray off all the hop debris, all the hot break, make sure it's all clean. I do empty it out, so I blow the water out. I don't know why I do that. It doesn't freeze here, but that's all I do for my immersion chiller.
Yeah, so I've gone through immersion, much like yourself. I've done immersion for most of it. I have a nice Hydra from Jaded Brewing. I've had different copper ones over time, but I got to a Hydra. And I love it. It cools very quickly. But cleaning it, it's got some nooks and crannies, so I have to kind of get in there and make sure it's all off. It takes a little more work, but I think it's worth it just because there's some gunk and things in some of the under parts of it. The one thing, I agree, cleaning it, just making sure it goes away clean. I haven't been blowing the water out, but one thing I thought about one day, how clean is it on the inside? And if you think the water is building up a scale, that scale would be somewhat thermally resistant. So I actually flushed it one day with just some acid cleaner, and a lot of crap came out. So if you have really hard water, now it depends on how hard your water is where you live. I tend to have lived in places that have harder water, and I found stuff in mine after cleaning it with some acid stuff. So, I was surprised, but it was in there. So, I don't think it was impacting my times significantly. I wasn't stopped cooling, but it was let's put it this way. It was visibly removing something. I can't comment on how the alacrity with which it was improving my chillability, but there was something in there. So
it's something I would never have considered until you just said that. So I think that's really interesting. I may have to do a flush just out of curiosity for myself.
Do an acid flush. You'll be
Yeah, there we go. So, well, there are other types of chillers, counterflow chillers like the exGEERitor we talked about earlier. Those are a little bit, in my opinion, if you're flushing it immediately after you're chilling, you're probably going to get most of the stuff out, especially if you are flushing it or recirculating hot water with a really powerful cleaner. You'll see gunk come out. And that's gunk that won't be, impacting your future beers. So that's a good thing. That's what I would suggest when I used a counterflow chiller for about 2 months, and that's how I cleaned it. And I know that's how Matt cleans his counterflow chiller as well. Works really well. I'm gonna have an opinion here that I'm gonna share, and it's a pretty staunch one. Why anybody would choose to use a plate chiller, I just don't know. I picked one up about 5 or 6 years ago, and after about 3 weeks, I all but threw the thing away. I finally gave it away to some homebrewer who wanted to try it out. But cleaning that thing was the biggest pain in my ass. I mean, I would flush it for 15 minutes with hot water in one end. It'd start flowing out clear, so I'd put it in the other end, and here goes more gunk coming out.
Yeah.
And it was like this weird seesaw thing where no matter, I couldn't get it all out. People were saying, well, you got to bake it. So I threw it in the oven and I baked it. Now it's black stuff coming out, but I just couldn't seem to get all of it out. The time for me when I was like, I'm done with this stupid thing, was I thought I had cleaned this thing as good as possible, and I'm making like a Hellas, and I go to chill my wort with it, and all these black flecks come out as I'm chilling the wort. It just, the beer turned out fine, so it didn't contaminate the beer, but my gosh, you would think that during the recirculation to sanitize it, and that's what I would do with these, is I'd recirculate the last 15 minutes of the boil. Same thing with my immersion chiller. I put it in for the last 15 minutes of the boil. You would have thought that it would have pulled all that stuff out, at least making it to the boil, but it didn't, and it drove me nuts. So I don't use them anymore, but that's how I would clean it. I'd bake the thing for half an hour or whatever, and then pull it out and flush it. But
yeah, so I have only done counterflow, and it's kind of a hybrid counterflow. I've not done counterflow as a plate chiller, I've not done a plate chiller as you described it. And really for the same reasons, Marshall. I don't know how clean that thing's going to be, and I've just read so much about it's hard to clean it. You're never going to get everything out. Well, if you can't get everything out, then it's never really clean, is it?
Exactly.
So I've always avoided them. I think the one thing for people that are using them is, you want to prevent anything from your kettle getting into them. So your screens and all your stuff is important. If you get a lot of hop particulate and things in there, you're just never going to go away. It does sound like, cleaning it, maybe some new cleaners on the market could help you out there. But like you said, I'm right there with you. I don't think those things are ever going to get 100% clean. It's kind of by design. You want surface area to clean stuff, but it's also counterproductive as a home brewer who doesn't have extremely aggressive caustic chemicals to ever clean it. So why do it? So
yeah, I'm just not a fan. If you're a plate chiller user out there, more power to you, man. But you got more patience than I do. So, well, I think that about covers most of the hot side gear. When we come back from this break, our focus is going to shift to how we keep our cold side stuff clean and sanitized.
Attention beer drinkers and thinkers, put that mash paddle down for a second. Let me ask you, do you like to cook outside? Do you love the smell of charcoal and barbecue?
If you've answered yes to any of those questions, I think you should check out the Grill Coach podcast, where we discuss all things barbecue and grilling.
Join us on our mission where we aim to learn, teach, and share the amazing world of grilling and barbecue. So grab a homebrew and join us. We think you'll find our perspective on the world of outdoor cooking unique.
You can find us online at thegrillcoach.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram at The Grill Coach.
From this homebrewer to you, get out there and grill.
After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you.
Compact and simple to use with a small footprint for brewing indoors, the Grainfather makes it easy for you to brew professional quality beers at home. The Grainfather is an all-in-one brewing system that lets you brew all grain beer in a single compact stainless steel unit. It uses an electric heating element and pump to maintain a constant temperature and to circulate the wort during the mashing and cooling stages. It also comes with a counterflow chiller to reduce chilling times and produce high-quality wort. And now, with the addition of their conical fermenter, the Grainfather takes things one step further by offering homebrewers state-of-the-art temperature-controlled fermentation just like commercial breweries use. And with the Grainfather Recipe Creator and Connect app, you can easily design a recipe, sync your brewing system with your phone, and then just sit back and relax as the app takes over and assures that you maintain your scheduled mash temps and boil schedule. Head to Grainfather.com to purchase your all-in-one brewing system today and to sign up for their free recipe creator tool. Once more, head on over to Grainfather.com, that's Grainfather.com, and get started today.
Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD, that's BRUPOD, at AtlanticBrewSupply.com. As nutty as I am about making sure my hot side gear is at least, somewhat clean, it's on the cold side that I really start to get anxious about things, and this is just because this is where contaminants can really wreak havoc on a beer, bringing sanitation into the picture. So once the wort is chilled, it usually gets transferred to a fermentation vessel, unless you're one of those people who ferments in your boil kettle, which is cool. But the risk of something going wrong increases as you're doing. The more transfers you make and the more vessels that wort touches. So, Andy, what's your routine for cleaning and sanitizing your fermenters?
So I am basically 99, I would almost say 100% on PET carboys these days. This is something I picked up really early on when I started home brewing. The PET, or the better bottle, just kind of came out, and it was kind of the de facto thing because, well, glass is great. Glass can also really hurt you if it goes the wrong way on you. So I've been working with PET for a long time. This was one of the first places when I started brewing where I had a lot of trouble. I would have a good batch, then a bad batch, then an okay batch, and I had to settle on a recipe and a routine, and it took a little while, but I did this. I'll have a PET carboy. It's going to be sanitized with Star San. That's pretty much my primary one. But then beer is going to go into it. Eventually, beer is going to come out of it. And what I do for cleaning these is first get all the gunk and the yeast and trub out of them. So they're really clean. But there's some stuff on the top of the walls. These are 6-gallon carboys, so there's some stuff on the top. So you need to get that out. And I got one of those, those jet stream or pump stream cleaners. So you flip it over, you shove this thing on the pump, and it sprays PBW into the boil and into it to cascade PBW all down the sides of it and remove all the material. And I find this works really well. One thing I did in the last few years, which really upped the game on this, was I used my sous vide immersion circulator to keep the PBW hot as it's pumping. So now what you have is, rather than filling the reservoir full of like 130 Fahrenheit PBW water recirculating, it stays at temperature the entire time, which helps me. It seems to get the gunk off a little bit faster.
The ingenuity of homebrewers. Mm-hmm. It makes me think of Ray Found, who wrote the article on the Brew Blaster, is what we call it. Which is basically his take, kind of a DIY version of, I believe they call it the Mark II or Mark's Cleaner or whatever.
Mark's Keg Cleaner.
There we go. Yeah, and he uses that. He's same thing as you. He uses those 6-gallon PET carboys. And he swears by that cleaner. Yeah. Not a difficult build. Nope. We've got the article on it. Some of the links have changed because that's the nature of the internet. But I've heard from so many people who have followed his DIY and absolutely love that thing. I'm too lazy to do that. And so, I mean, I've used pretty much every type of fermenter there is out there. I started with buckets. Actually, my story about how I switched from buckets to PET carboys is because of cleaning and sanitation.
Yep.
I had picked up these like 8-gallon buckets, which I thought were awesome because easy to make a 6-gallon batch without, blowing off foam everywhere, Mm-hmm. And so these buckets had a plastic valve at the bottom, which made racking the beer out all the more easier, right? No more racking canes. It was this really great thing. Well, when you take a bucket full of wort and you put it into a freezer and you close that freezer and you set the temperature at 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 C, there's going to be some moisture in the air. And I went through this phase where, it was actually 2 batches that I was fermenting next to each other. And I went down to, they'd finished fermenting. I was getting ready to go rack them into kegs. I pull them out and the valves on both of these buckets was just covered in green mold.
Ooh.
And I don't know, I don't get angry very easily. And my wife had to come out and she was like, why are you throwing those buckets all over the garage? What are you doing? And so I ended up pulling them out of the trash can and now I use them as my, oddly enough, my sanitizer containers that I keep in the garage. But that was when I did switch over to the PET carboys. Now cleaning buckets for me, I was always afraid of scratching them. So I didn't want to use anything that was too rough. Somebody even told me that the scratchy side of a sponge is too rough for them. So I literally just had like a bath towels, those kind of hand towels, and I would get them wet with really hot water and just make sure there was no trube left and clean them off. And then I'd spray them down kind of like I do everything else. And that seemed to work just fine. I did move to those 6-gallon PET carboys for a while. And since I don't use, this was an idea that actually came from my brother. I don't use a mechanical cleaning system.
Yeah.
So what I would do is at the time when I was using those carboys, I would fill it with OxyClean, which it works. The thing that sucks about OxyClean, you have to get OxyClean free first off, so it doesn't smell, is it does foam, unlike PBW or other, the accelerator cleaner, all of that stuff. So what I would do is I'd fill it with the proper amount of PBW solution to the neck, and I'd let it sit sometimes overnight, but usually at least an hour. I'd go and I'd empty that out, spray it down with hot water, high pressure hot water. And if there was still anything left, I would take a washcloth, get it nice and wet, make sure it didn't smell like, downy or anything, shove it into the neck of the carboy, add a little bit of water. And then all you do is you cover up the hole of the carboy and then spin it around wherever you want to scrub. And it wipes off. I mean, you've already done the soak, so it's already loosened everything up. Beautifully wipes off any trube lines or anything like that. So little tip from somebody who's used carboys a ton. It works really well. In fact, I did a comparison about 3 weeks ago, actually, when I got this exfoliator cleaner. I had 2 carboys that I had fermented some cider in, and they both had really sticky Croisen lines on them. So I filled one with PBW, and I did the other one with the exfoliator cleaner. The exfoliator cleaner one was perfectly clean. I didn't have to put the rag in there. But yeah, toss that rag in the other one and wipe it around. It worked beautifully.
Yeah, I will say the same thing I've seen with the PET carboys, because I'm not just trashing them every time, I'm reusing them at least a few. I mean, going to be a few batches unless there's a serious reason. But I do the same thing. I'll put a paper towel or a rag in there and just give them a whip around after soaking for a bit. It might take a couple iterations. That's why I mentioned I've been finding, I say reuse PBW, not for weeks, over the course of a few days. If I'm cleaning a few things, a bigger project, I'll reheat it and reuse it. But it does have like a saturation point, and it just doesn't clean anymore. It's not that it's getting things dirty. It just can't take on any more debris. So you might have to give it a couple runs, but it'll come off a PET carboy and it'll look pretty nice.
Yeah. And my goal with carboys, regardless, or with any fermenter, is that it looks very, very clean. It's clear.
Yes.
There's no hazy stuff on it. And so the blend of a cleaner, and then if you need to, swiping a rag around in there for a little while, really seems to work on the plastic stuff. Now, I have used glass carboys, not often, but I have used them before. On those, I'll use the little carboy brush that they sell you with your first equipment kit, and those do seem to work well when you can reach the stuff that you're going after. I think a lot of people are moving away from glass carboys in part because they can kill you, but also because they are difficult to clean. They're slippery,
I put with those brushes, I was, so part of my PET experience, I had this issue with cleaning them. It turns out, like I mentioned earlier about using RO water, if you use hard water with PBW or some of these chemicals, it'll work for a bit, but then you could have long-term issues. And I was actually building up a bit of a haze on the outside using harder water was one step or with PBW. So going to RO water, if that was ever something you're having issues with cleaning wise, try changing the water. But for a spell, I said, I'm going to go to glass because I can scrub it, right? Well, I went one night to scrub it and I put a big old hole because the tip of that brush is metal.
Yep.
Right. And you just go whap and a big old glass chunk came out. And I'm like, well, I'm done with this thing. This isn't going back anymore. So
at least you didn't end up in the hospital.
Exactly. No, I've thankfully I've had that was one small accident. And another time a glass carboy, that's the one where I use glass carboys is for saving Star San. I have that with a stopper in my garage. And one time, the previous one, it kind of just slipped a little bit on the ground and it had started forming a crack. Luckily, I grabbed it and was able to put it away so it wasn't going to destroy everything. Ugh. But, those glass things, like you said, they'll kill you.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I've seen more than enough forum posts from people who had bad experience with the glass carboys to stay very, very far away from them. Yeah. And particularly we're in a hobby that is, we drink. Come on now. Sure. It just makes sense not to use them. But if you do, again, more power to you. These days now, I'm most of the fermentation vessels that I'm using nowadays are stainless. They have big wide openings on the top. I basically treat them the same way that I do my boil kettle, except for, the valves come off. They're really easy. I keep the valves off. I go and I scrub them out with my little scrub daddy. I will, for fermentation vessels, because they're cold side, I will put just, I don't do a full batch of cleaner, but I'll just sprinkle a little bit on the bottom of my, of the fermentation vessel, put some hot water in there. And I use that kind of pool of water to come up to the sides and just scrub down the sides of the vessel. Excuse me. Oh God. Swallowed my spit. To just scrub down the sides of the vessel, just to make sure that it's really clean. And again, there's a really weird thing that happens. I was actually talking with Mike Tonsmeyer about this when we were in New Zealand, where, and I don't know if it's because I didn't properly passivate initially, but with my stainless fermenters, if I don't clean it properly and I go let it air dry, I'll come back and there'll be like this weird powdery film that forms. But if I use a little bit of elbow grease and some cleaner in there, and you can feel when that stuff is off, it gets slick, and you want that slickness. You don't want it to feel like it's catching on anything. It's a real subtle change, but so I go around and I scrub until that goes away. I mean, it takes me maybe 45 seconds to clean an entire fermentation vessel. Once that's gone, I rinse it off. It's really shiny. I go and I set it out upside down to air dry in my garage, and I will always go back and check to make sure that that doesn't form that scale, that powdery stuff that I've seen before. Because I do think that may have been an issue that I was having with some of the beers that I was brewing.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you ever think, and this is maybe from people who are thinking at home, since it's stainless, ever using boiling hot water to sanitize after cleaning?
I've never done that. I've heard of people who do. To me, the water that I have coming out of my faucet, my utility sink faucet, it's really hot. I mean, we keep our hot water tank fairly decently hot, about halfway turned up. So I'm guessing 150, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah. And so I use that, and then I'm scrubbing as much as I can. So I guess boiling the water, I don't see how much more effective it would be. I guess I could try it, but I'm not having issues with it right now.
Yeah, you're not having issues then. Great. I think that some people at home, one thing I can't do with cold side stuff is a lot of it's plastic. So I can't have the, peace of mind to use really hot things on this side. So I'm just wondering if that's something you've done. But if it's been working out, then it's all good.
Yeah. Well, and so I keep bringing up Scrub Daddy. One of the neat things about that product is that when you use it with cold water, it gets really hard. So it's a lot more scrubby. When you use it with hot water, it gets soft. So I've got a Spidell tank, one of their, I think it's 7.5 gallon Spidell tanks. It's an awesome fermentation vessel, a little bit bulky. You can't fit two in this 10 cubic foot chest freezer, but I'll use it for one-off batches or whatever. And I'll use the Scrub Daddy to clean that thing, but only after, only when I'm using hot water, because it keeps it nice and soft, but it makes it so that I don't worry too much about scratching that HDPE plastic,
Sure.
Yeah. So now fermentation vessels also have valves nowadays. A lot of them do. I was talking about the one on my bucket before. For cleaning the valves, what I'll usually do is keep the valve connected to the fermentation vessel when I'm doing the initial cleaning, run some hot water out through that, and usually a little bit of cleaner with it. But then I'll take it off, give it a nice, cleaning and rinse. I've heard of people who will soak their valves in like a hot cleaning solution for an hour or so. I don't do anything like that. Again, I've not had any issues, but these valves are pretty simple. And to me, again, I'm pulling it out. As soon as I'm done kegging, they're getting cleaned. I'm not letting them sit around or anything like that. So.
Yeah, for me, I don't have any valves on the PETs. I know they sell ported ones, and those just scare me. I just think that valve's going to open up one day. So I like to have that smooth vessel. And then, have airlocks and stuff, but keep those clean. If you have Chrysin come out the top of them, you want to make sure afterwards you clean those things out. Otherwise, they're just going to become a mess.
Yeah.
I guess you could, I use the S-shaped airlocks pretty much exclusively. And, they'll get gunk in them occasionally. Just make sure they're clean, fill them back full of sanitizer. Should be fine.
Exactly. Now you're using PET carboys, so you're using a racking cane to rack the wort out of your carboy. I still use PET carboys almost exclusively for making hard cider because I add fruit to that, and I found that racking canes, the one area where I really love a racking cane is when there's fruit and other additives in the beer, because you're not sucking that into the bottom valve, right? You kind of have control over where the bottom of that racking cane's at. What are you doing to make sure that your racking cane is? Are you using plastic or stainless?
Yeah, so I've gone back and forth. Part of why I've picked plastic over stainless for a few of these things is that if there is an issue, or if you think there's a problem, then you can always get a new one. It's not a large cost. That being said, you can clean stainless really well. There's more upfront costs. So for the racking cane, I'll just make sure it's always put away clean. I'll maybe PBW, hot water, that kind of stuff. I'll check all the parts. There's kind of nooks and crannies. That's the one thing I think, since I expose it to both PBW and Star San on a regular basis, those do degrade over time. It's kind of have that tinsely kind of look that plastic has, because it's sort of slowly starting to crack and stuff.
Yeah.
So you want to watch it. What is nice though is, for me, since I brew both clean beers and sour beers, I essentially have a hand-me-down program for the sour stuff, because that stuff, you assume once bacteria gets in it, it's never going away.
Yeah.
So, hey, I use this racking cane for a while. It could be any number of batches. All right, time to retire it, and that just goes down to another system where I get a new racking cane. But they're very simple. The plastic ones, the auto siphons, are a very simple system, easy to clean. I know that there was a stainless steel racking cane out in the market, an auto siphon like one. I just found it had a few too many nooks and crannies for me, and it just so I haven't really used it very much. I still have it. I use it occasionally. What's nice about all these different auto siphons is they actually have a tip that prevents getting all that stuff into the beer.
Yeah.
So you can kind of buffer yourself from a lot of the junk at the bottom of a carboy, especially when you're doing fruit, or when I do a lot of IPAs, like keeping the stuff in the fermenter.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And so the racking canes that I've been using for years now, and I still have two of them on hand, are the stainless ones. I forget what More Beer calls them. The sterile siphon starter, I believe, is what they call them. And they're just pieced together. It's a standard racking cane that's made of stainless, and then you got a carboy cap. It goes through the center hole in the carboy cap, and there's like a HEPA filter that you blow into to start the siphon.
Yeah.
My way of cleaning those, again, everything that I clean, I do as soon as I'm done using it, and fingers crossed, my hope is that in doing that, nothing has time to dry or to stick around, and that I'm actually being able to rinse, everything out. So as soon as I'm done using them, I'll take it over to my utility sink, get my water as hot as it'll get. At the end of the tubing, which I keep attached to my racking cane, I do have a pin lock disconnect, and that's because I'll rack, closed system. I rack into the keg that way, but I will remove the pin from, or the, the depressor, the post, top post part. I'll remove that from the disconnect, so it's nice and open, and then I'll plug one hole because there's two holes at the end of that disconnect, and then run water through the other side of it, and then I run water through the end of the racking cane out through the disconnect just to make sure it's perfectly clean. I do the hottest water I can, and then I do some weird stuff. I will take the racking cane outside, whip it around my head for a while until the tubing at least doesn't have any water in it, and then this is the part that I think is pretty awkward. I will take the end of the racking cane and just kind of put it in my mouth and suck in as hard as I can a few times just to clear out as much residual water that's in the cane without blowing my nasty air into the racking cane. So I'm sucking ambient air into it, and then I'll just dip the end of the racking cane in some sanitizer to clean off whatever might have been on my mouth. Sure. I know it's weird, but I'm going to re-sanitize the thing anyways. My biggest concern with that is not getting mildew or mold growth in the tubing or the racking cane. So I want it as dry as possible when I put it away.
Yeah, I always want to hang those things. Like, I don't necessarily whip it around my head to dry it, but, I'll make sure they just can drape somewhere so they can just drain out if, whatever they have. So you want to make it dry. And that's just a risk you're going to take. It's if you don't do this, it's a risk you're going to take, and you're going to be really disappointed when you're ready to rack this great beer and your racking cane is a mess.
Yeah.
You're just going to have, what do I do? How do I fix this? And then you have to go learn how to make a siphon with just tubing and water, and good luck with that. It is not fun.
It's unless you're comfortable,
doing.
Yeah. Holding one in there and then like suck starting the siphon which, to be honest with you, when I first started brewing, I kind of invented this way of doing a suck started siphon that didn't involve me touching the tubing. I took the center of a Bic pen and it fit perfectly inside the tube. So I would suck on the Bic pen, and then as soon as the siphon started to flow, I'd kink the hose, pull the Bic out, and then I had my siphon going. So I guess that's another trick. I don't have to do that anymore. But
no.
Now when it comes to packaging equipment, there's a lot of concerns with how to go about keeping this stuff sanitized. You and I don't bottle much anymore. No. I will say real briefly that when I was bottling, or in the times that I still do, very, very rare, I will put however many bottles I plan to package into my dishwasher and run it on high heat without any soap. And that has worked really well for me. I do that and consider it sanitizing as well, because it is getting so hot if you're using your hot water wash. I know other people who do that. Seems to work out really well for them.
Yeah, I've been bottling, kegging for quite many years, and I do bottle occasionally depending on the beer. But when I was bottling, I was reusing bottles, so I was doing these soaks to get labels off and PBW.
Oh yeah.
It works, and then it just got harrowing, and I'm like, well, I don't bottle so much anymore, so I'll just start with clean bottles, or fresh bottles from the shop. So I'll bring those home. I will not do any hard cleaning, but I will fill those. I will spray sanitizer in them and shake them, and then drain the sanitizer out. So at least I'm getting any dust or anything inside of them out. And then I'm bottling on those. So they have the sanitizer. I feel comfortable with that, I just don't bottle as much anymore, so it's not as much of a concern for me.
Yeah.
Usually it's sour beers or wild beers, so I'm even a little bit less worried. Or it's very big high alcohol beers that I'm just going to age. So yeah, I'm not as concerned.
Yeah. Now they do have these bottle trees and all that stuff. I know people swear by those. I think they look really, really fun and seem to work really well for draining that sanitizer out. So when it comes to bottling, I think the biggest thing is making sure that for me at least, when I was bottling, I wasn't doing it very often. And so when I would store those bottles, whether they were store-bought or if I cleaned out some old Sierra Nevada bottles, my big thing was in storing them, I didn't want crap falling into them. So a little trick that a buddy told me was, if you store them upside down, the bottom of the cardboard box blocks the opening from anything going into them, plus nothing's going to fall into them. So just a little trick, if you're still using bottles, as soon as you get them from the store, just flip them upside down, or when you're done cleaning them up after use, store them upside down. To me, I thought it was kind of a clever little trick. So now kegs have quite a few little moving parts, right? I mean, there are things to consider. Now, this is going to be a little controversial when we talk about this, because I don't go to the lengths some people do with their kegs. So for me, when a keg kicks in my keezer, I'll usually leave it in there for a while because I'm lazy. And so that keg will sit in the keezer for maybe, I try to remember to move the gas off of it. I don't know why. I don't think it matters, but so I'll disconnect the gas from it, pull the keg out, and then that might be 2 weeks after the keg kicks, and then I'll leave the kicked keg in my garage for another 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know. Sometimes I just forget it's there. So when I get around to cleaning it, usually there is a nice, a film on the bottom that you can't get off just with water and scrubbing. So if I've done that, if I've made the mistake of being that lazy, again, I'll give a nice hot cleaner soak. I've done this with that exfoliator wash. It works incredibly incredibly well. But let it sit there. I only fill half the keg with cleaner because I don't want to waste the cleaning solution. And in my mind, you're not fermenting unless you are fermenting in kegs. But if you're just using it for serving, you're not going to have a Kreuzen line or anything like that to worry about. Really, what you want to focus on is the dip tube and the bottom of that keg. And so I'll do the soak. As soon as I'm done, after I leave it about an hour with the hot water soak, pour that out, spray it out. If I need to scrub it off, I've got a toilet wand brush that I use to reach down in there and give it a nice scrub, make sure it's nice and clean. Usually what I'll do, this is the part that's a little controversial, is when it has that cleaner in it, I'll kind of hold it up sideways and then I depress the poppet on the disconnect or on the post. The liquid post. I don't really concern myself too much with the gas post.
Sure.
And then run the hot cleaner through that for a little bit. Let it sit in there for the hour-long soak. And then, again, I depress the poppet and let it all run out as I'm cleaning the keg. Maybe in between every fourth or fifth batch that I serve out of a keg, I will take the posts off and give them a soak. But I've been finding that when I clean them the way that I do, there's nothing in there. They are really clean. You have to run water through those posts though, or at the very least, that's the lazy man's version of this. But if you're not doing that, you are going to find some nasties in there.
Yeah. In general, I'm pretty similar. I do probably take it a slightly higher level. I will get a brush and take that poppet off and do a brush on the inside all the way down there. I do like your trick though. I'll probably start using it. I just want to make sure everything is sealing right, and I get to check on the O-rings and kind of do an overall inspection. I mean, I definitely one night I needed a keg basically immediately. So one keg I just kicked. So I did I think I called it like a hot transfer or something. I just took that keg out, gave it a rinse in boiling hot water, rinsed all that stuff out, put the new beer in there, sealed it back up, and put it back in my kegerator. So if you don't want to clean anything, you just want to fill a keg quickly. I did that.
You've only done that once, Andy?
I've only done that. I will say I've only done that once.
Dude, I can't tell you. The reason I started with the lazy approach is because I do that occasionally. I can't tell you how many times I've taken a keg that had a great beer in it out of the keezer. I take it over to my utility sink. I make sure not to touch the inside of it, but I'll run that hot water. I rinse out all the trub. I run some hot water through the dip tube, and then I'll just go put sanitizer in it. And I will sanitize it. I mean, I do that every time. Put some sanitizer, but I'm not scrubbing it. I'm not, as long as there's nothing in the bottom, if it served a good beer and I'm just drinking this beer for my own enjoyment. I mean, I guess it's a little bit more risky, but I have never had an issue doing that. So I'm not advocating for anything. I'm not trying to convince people to do it like that, but in a pinch, it's worked for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we don't always mention during this episode, sanitization, cleaning at and sanitizing after. That's the right order. Usually, I'm always doing sanitizer. I say the one thing about cleaning and sanitizing is for kegs is I will usually, if not every time, virtually every time after cleaning, I will fill it full of sanitizer all the way to the top and then push the sanitizer out with CO2 to make sure the whole thing has got CO2 all the way through it. When I rack beer into it, it's good to go.
Yeah, pretty much these days, every beer that I keg or every keg that I put beer into has been purged of CO2 using that method. So it's going to have sanitizer in it. It is a concern whether you got like actual solids in there because you didn't clean it well enough. You don't want that stuff in your beer. So just be mindful of it. Again, get a really strong cleaner or maybe I don't even know if it works if you mix something like PBW at double strength, but if it's strong enough cleaner, it will eat through whatever is setting at the bottom of that keg and then get a brush down in there and just make sure that's clean. You want to do that as much as possible. And I tend to, so if I don't see anything, I will be a little more risky because I brew a lot and, I take certain, risks, I suppose. But all right, the final thing that we can talk about, and this is kind of an interesting one because I've heard some curious approaches to cleaning one's kegerator or keezer. Again, a lot of moving parts. I will tell you this, that I've never cleaned anything on the gas side of my keezer. Just assuming that it doesn't touch any beer. So I'm assuming that nothing bad can come from it. All of the disconnects are clean. The tubing never has beer in it. So
yeah, in general, I have done some brief rinses when I see beer sometimes go back up a gas line because of some weird gas imbalance in my system. Most of my vessels or valves have gas protection so they don't let things flow backwards. But I have had it occasionally happen. It's a gas imbalance. But I'll just give them a rinse, blow all that water out of there. It's got CO2, so you can just run that until you don't see anything else coming out, and you should be just fine.
So yeah, I've never had that issue where beer goes up into my gas lines. But I'm also kind of a weirdo where I won't overfill my kegs specifically because I don't want to risk. I've got really expensive secondary regulators in my Keezer. I think I've got 2 sets in there, and so I just I don't want to play that game.
No, I think it's a very good point. Is that if you do your kegs correctly, you'll never have this problem. Put it that way.
That's how I look at it. So, okay, one of the more moving-ist parts of a kegerator or Keezer setup is the faucet. Is there, and I guess we could speak to them together, but the faucets and the beer lines, is there anything specific that you do, say between batches or just to maintain your faucets to make sure that they're as clean as possible?
This is the one place where I think I've been a little lazy and assuming things will just be fine if they take their natural course. What I will do is I might run some Star San in between the lines, pack a full of Star San and run it. I don't know. This is probably just making me feel better at night, sleeping easier at night, because I have done, the occasional, all right, let's get a beer line cleaner out, BLC, which is a different product. It's a little stronger. And you'll see stuff come out like we have like a different color to it sometimes. So, I should be doing that more often. I'll be the first to admit it, but at least I want something in there between beer. But that being said, it's a short draw system. I keep really clean beer in it because I know my beer has been treated well. It's not getting warm, so it's not shouldn't grow anything anytime soon. But I want to flush it and I clean it. But I clean all the quick disconnects and stuff like that pretty regularly.
So I don't have any quick disconnects in my Keezer. That is definitely an upgrade that I want to make soon. But I run 12 foot of line, I think 12 to 15 foot of line for each of my 7 taps. And I keep them coiled up so you can still see the whatever beer, cider, or whatever I'm pushing out in the line. And so what I've come to do, when I first built my Keezer, I didn't even consider cleaning the beer lines. I mean, there'd be a keg would kick. I'd have another one ready. I'd put it on there. I'd just push out the old beer with the new beer, and then and I'd keep drinking, and it was no big deal. Well, after 5 or 6 months, I'd start to notice just little bits of gunk building up in those beer lines. Yeah. My first and foremost, I swap out my beer lines at least once a year. It's not expensive. I don't buy the really expensive beer line. I'm buying the cheap 3/16 inch stuff from More Beer. I buy a 100-foot roll of it, and then I give whatever is left over to Tim and Jersey, and they swap theirs out. So. Sure. So that's that. Now, in between batches, what I've come to do is I've got so many kegs. I filled one. I do have BLC, beer line cleaner. So I filled one with the proper solution of that stuff. I keep it right next to my Keezer. And so as soon as a keg kicks, I pull that liquid post off, plug it onto my keg with the BLC in it, and I just run that out at a fairly low PSI because I want it to go slow, but I want it to move for about 30 seconds. And then I leave that beer line cleaner solution in the tubing. So I want it to stay in there just to, again, that might be some sort of an illusion, but to me, it's doing more than having it empty, having that line empty. And so that's what I do between every single batch. And part of me wanting to do that, besides wanting to preserve my line as long as possible, is because I might have a hard berry cider on, and then on that same tap, I'm putting, let's say, a Pilsner or something. And I don't want that beer line to hold on to any of those flavors because it's been sitting in the line for so long,
Absolutely. That was one thing I did once I got my kegerator. I had, the picnic taps and a couple kegs for a while. But once I built my first one, I actually bought the really nice line, the rigid line, which is like kind of a glass lining, so that in between beers, there was almost no flavor pickup. But with that vinyl, something's going to get in there, and you're going to need a more, stronger cleaner. And I think BLC is the right one. It just does a better job when things are a little colder, about breaking up organics and things in the line. So I think it's worth using it in that specific place for beer line.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, I've heard anecdotally from somebody, I don't quote me on this, but they said that double strength Star San solution. So if you do, what would that be? 2 ounces for 5 gallons of water. That works about as well as beer line cleaner. You know, it is an acid, so I can see how that might be true. I don't do that, so I can't speak to it, but it is out there. The final thing when it comes to kegerators and keezers, and this is where I've gotten lazy, are the disconnects, whether you're pin lock or ball lock. There have been times where I go and I look at mine and I'm going, holy schmoly, I should probably pay more attention to these things, because it builds up little bits of crud around it, and so I'll, the only times I really soak them are when I'm swapping out my beer line, and I'm just based on my experience with a lack of contamination, I'm assuming that's okay. But in between, every 4 or 5 batches, I'll go and I'll take a look, get a Q-tip down in there, and just kind of scrub out the inside of the disconnect, and that's about it. Again, my experience has been pretty good with that. So.
Yeah, I think in general, the name of the game is keeping things clean, and then I think a lot of your process will follow. It'll allow sanitizers to hang around and do their job correctly. Peace of mind in between brew systems when you're just checking out your equipment, making sure it's together. And in the end, like we said, it's about making consistent beer for myself. So we want to just eliminate any other variables that are possible. So yeah, keep your system clean.
I think it's pretty obvious at this point that both of us care quite a bit about keeping our brewing gear clean and sanitized, even if we have, different takes on what that means or approaches to doing it. I know we didn't touch on every last piece of brewing gear. That would take way more time than we've got, but I do think we hit most of the important points. If you're listening out there and you've got some tips or some cool things that you do to keep your stuff clean, please do share them with us. That is all the time we've got for this episode. Andy, do you have any final thoughts before we stick fork in this one?
I just wondering, you said how much PBW to water. I just wait till it gets soapy, personally. So,
I always go off the side of the package, whatever it says. That's what I mix it to. So, well, right on, man. Don't forget to head over to brewlosophy.com to stay current on all of the sciencey stuff we're up to. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman.